Yeah, I would just, that was a great template, um, and, so much in it. I appreciate that. And I would just say the same thing in a different way, because the phrase that came up in me is if just as a general question, what is your question? Is there a question that everybody has or has had or in their life? And I often find if I write a question down and then say it's, okay, why do I like that? And then I'll say, okay, well, why is it important to me? Okay, why did I think that was a good idea? Or what does that take me to? Where does that come from? So I keep asking questions about the question to try and just kind of see where it leads, what it can uncover. And, so maybe there's a kernel in there that can be found at a deeper depth. And then I would say, okay, well, where do I see that in the arc of my life? Has it been working unconsciously in all these choices I've made and places I've gone? Because I think if you can find those important questions to your life, that you will see them arising in the way you've gone on and the places you've been and the things you've done. So and then there's the confirmation of that by the reality that you've experienced. So you've brought a level of consciousness you've brought from a great depth of yourself to a level of consciousness, something that really can be brought forward, every day.
And when you are able to trace the inquiry through the arc of your life, it is true to say, factually true to say, that has been a permanent line inquiry. It followed you, the line of your life, throughout the arc of your life, even in times where you perhaps, before you formulated the question in a conscious way, it was already active in you. And you have also demonstrated the practice in the way you, as the chief editor here in Portals of Perception, you had one question at the top of the homepage, even before we launched the site live, and after 2 or 3 months, you updated that question because you kept thinking about it, and you changed, I think, just one word in that formulation, and it moved it from a question that resonated 8. Well, I was using the 5 scale, so let me not bastardize my practice. You moved it from being 4.2 out of 5 to 4.6 or 4.7. I don't know if it's the 5, but it's somewhere up there. And that's part of the practice, continual search and continual refinement.
If I may add, David, alongside what you've just presented, the idea of a living issue, because I feel it's a potent term to bring into the territory. I cannot in my life think separately of a permanent line inquiry without the idea of a living issue, which in a way I believe comes first, because all the great people that you mentioned had a living issue about something, which gave rise in them to many inquiries. So I find this is very important to locate and keep alive in a life. Then the question just follow. And one needs to find a way to arrange them. And another thing that I wanted to add is we are used to looking at the great people as the source of the solution. And another thing that needs to change is all the great men have gone, now it's your turn. It's the personal responsibility and the capability of each human to be part of the change, to be an active part of the change. And that's why the permanent line inquiry and the living issue of each individual is so important into any successful process.
And you're obviously making that last point together with what you offered at the beginning, which is the sense of humility, rather than the sense of aggrandizement. Because we live in a time where you're right that all the great men and women that we know to quote their names in history are off the world stage. At the same time, we live in a time where one of the great conundrums is that you have all the tools and the technology for people to become their own self-aggrandized version of whatever they think they are. And I know that's not what you're proposing. You're proposing more the idea that the royal and the noble property is not something that belongs to few, but is potentiated in each and every life once you become present to that essence on the inside. And that in fact, that's part of what we are seeking. So I see you are edging us to move towards answers, but I'm holding the horses back here because I'd like to still introduce practice 2, which will help us become more diagnostic. But I think Kyriaki wants to come in on something before we go there.
Yeah, just to say how brilliant this practice is, and it's a very useful tool, and it feels like you start something, and another intelligence kind of joins you. So yeah, I often find that this happens, especially in creating something, that you start something, and if your inquiry, if you persist with your inquiry and you generate around it, it often happens that something else that you never thought about comes in. And in relation to this, I want to say that it's interesting that behind every question, there is another question. And what gives birth to that question? What is the need that gives birth to that question? What form makes the conscious formulate it or put it in that language? What is the unconscious need that is causing, that is a causing factor? And then I suppose that once you touch upon this unconscious need, then a lot of things come to formulate a picture or an answer from your experience, from your childhood, from the film you saw, from the book you read, from something your mom told you or your grandmom told you 30 years ago. You know, a bit like Hercule Poirot from Agatha Christie, that he has all this information and suddenly this becomes important to decipher a crime or something. So, yeah, information or knowledge that might seem not important gets important and might be the exact key and the exact answer to your inquiry once you touch upon this core need.
Well, that's exactly the reason why at the beginning when you framed the question, I asked why, what propels it? And this sense of getting in touch with that potent desire and the passionate need that inspires you, or what Avshalom calls the living issue. It doesn't really matter whether it's the chicken or the egg and the chicken. The permanent line practice is ultimately a way to get in touch and hone and formulate and become active and operative with this process in you, because the reality is that many people have a living issue or strong sentiments or strong desires, but they hold back from bringing those into a conscious practice that actually gains some traction and leads to some results. And that's partly why we offer that. So it is with that. Actually, let me say this. So what have we done so far? We have so far demonstrated a couple of practices, but the meta practice, which I offered at the beginning, was that when you are facing with a large question or a simple question, you treat the question, you treat the inquiry not as a destination, but as an invitation for a journey to enable a journey, an infrastructure that will enable you to embark on the construction of what you want to construct. And so that's what we've done, first half of what we've done so far. And here I'd like to introduce the next practice, which is so often when I'm facing a question, I will complement it with the reverse inquiry. So for example, if the question is, what might be a way for humanity to transcend its horrific past and discover a new operating system, one that is not grounded in zero-sum game, but is ready to embrace the best of all parties? Suppose that was the inquiry, and suppose the essence of it was this intuition that Kyriaki articulates and brings to us about a sense of unity. Then I would take this question and I would reverse the question and I would ask, okay, what holds us back from that actualization or that elevation? Or what stop situations must be released such or need to be transformed such that we will truly be able to access that future sense of unity? And by the way, I said at the outset that we are prepared to ask here inquiries that may come across naive on behalf of the toddlers of tomorrow, because we assert the permission to be engaged in an inquiry in a cynicism-free zone. We assert the permission of human life to be defiant, ferociously defiant of cynicism. Cynicism in the sense of curtailing the range of what we can dream about, what we can envision into, what we can explore. So I would ask a question like this. And what I will sometimes do with a question like this, which is ultimately a diagnostic inquiry, it's another way of saying, what are the problems we need to solve, just in a more open-ended way. What I will often do is, exactly, because you've seen me do this before and we are practicing it, and let me bring this up. You know what I'm going to bring up? I'm going to be proposing that we use the technology that we call Loomwork. I've demonstrated on several other occasions Loomwork, so this time we will not do a step-by-step brief for Loomwork. And if Peter, as the chief editor here of Portals of Perception, will insist that we sometime do a practice run for Loomwork, we will do it separately. The idea of a loom is you have a question or you have a title. So again, some focusing area, and then you choose to bring up 3 boxes or 7 circles or 9 elliptic shapes, whatever you like to do. I often like to bring 9 or 12 boxes because these are good numbers to work with. And what that allows, it allows us to approach the journey free of the compression of a linear or chronological path. The premise being that human life is much more of an orchestra than one instrument. Each one of us, we're not a trumpet, we're not a trombone. We are a full orchestra. So what I find is when we inquire into a question like what stop situations hold humanity back from transcending and releasing a greater life-affirming, creative, and collaborative potential, you need an orchestral piece in response to that. You need a symphonic arrangement, not a solo instrument. So you bring one box, but it feels limiting. So you bring 3 other boxes. Now, some people will panic when they see that, or panic when they see that. But if you think that each box, or if you don't like boxes, you can do spheres, is actually a portal. And what it allows you to begin to journey into one way of approaching the challenge, and then there is something that comes next to it, but you want to keep it contained, and then there is a 3rd dimension and a 4th dimension, and so on, and before you know it, you have 9 or 12 dimensions, and you're able to go deep into each one of those, or you're able to go and explore the relationship between any combination of 2 or 3, and the permutation is endless in terms of the potential to explore the inquiry. All this is before we are beginning to seek to answer the question. This is just us seeking to be diagnostic about the challenges that we are facing. And my proposal is that we go now box by box. I can tell you right now, each box could easily serve us for a 60 or 90 minutes starter conversation. That's not the intent. The intent is to give a very high level starter to each one of those. And because I will propose now what I will try to assert at the end. Some of the boxes that we will come to are so compelling that you will easily find genuine, truly believing people who will express the sincerest conviction that if you solve that one issue, the entire story of humanity is redeemed to a new permission and elevation range. And they believe so passionately that that is the case, that they refuse to see any other problem but through the lens with which they find their passion. And I will assert that we actually, to truly answer the question from Kyriaki, we need to address all 12 of those spaces that at the moment are blank, and probably more than 12. I just ran out of space, so I landed with 12. Easily could become 16. And I'm actually cheating on the way because some of those I'll be using one space to put 2. And I will propose at the end that the challenge you are proposing by asking about the unity issue, the unity premise, the unity promise, that what you are inviting us is to be reflective of those 12 challenges. So how about if I bring them one at a time and we have a bit of a brief conversation on each, and use this conversation today as a seeding conversation. We can come back to any of those at any point in time later. And I know that on the run-up to this conversation this morning, Kyriaki produced your loom, of which I know nothing about, and you might at some point say, hey, enough with your loom, let me share my loom, which I will welcome. So how about that as a way to proceed?
Yes.
Okay, so one more thing about looms. Sometime we will bring an inner logic into the loom and we will say the bottom line, the lower line will be foundational principles, the middle line will be starter consideration, the top line will be advanced considerations. Sometime we will look at this in terms of past, present, future. Sometime we will look at this in terms of high, middle, and low, and we need to define what we mean by high, middle, and low. On this occasion, in the interest of easiest access for anybody that will join this, I'm going to start this by the most obvious easy access, somewhere in the middle. We'll travel through the first eight, the 2 rows at the top, in an area that is perhaps less obvious and less where often our inclinations will be, but perhaps would be very natural to approach this.